In this example, we are going to be evaluating this limit. You'll notice there's a lot of stuff going on in here. When we get down into it, the first thing that we notice is if we plugged in 0 for x, we get 1 divided by 0 minus 1 divided by 0, which is not going to do anybody any good. So the first thing that we want to do is get a common denominator, right? We want to smush these two fractions together. Now the first fraction is going to be just fine. The second fraction, let's multiply by a fancy one. So we're going to multiply by 1 square root of 1 plus x on both the top and the bottom of our fraction. So that is going to give us our limit as x goes to 0. And on our, when we have the same denominator, 1 plus x in our square root, our numerators can be put together. So notice in our numerators, if we thought of this as one big long numerator, we'd get the 1 minus 1 times square root of 1 plus x. All right, so this looks a little bit better. I'm going to go and write that out again on the next page because now the question is, where do we go from here? And in this case, when you have 1 minus the square root of something, and things are a little bit funky, the thing to try out, and this is something that if you just do enough math, you kind of realize this is one of those tricks or tips to keep in mind, is we are going to multiply on both the top and bottom, so we aren't changing our limit at all, we're just multiplying by a fancy 1, multiply by 1 plus square root of 1 plus x. So if you have a minus here, you're going to change it to a plus when you multiply. If you have a plus, you're going to change everything to a minus. So we just want the opposite sign, but the same everything else. All right, let's see what happens when we do that. In our denominator, and I'm going to do the denominator first because it's the easiest to write out, we are not going to touch much of anything. We are just going to write this out. And we're going to keep our parentheses here. Parentheses are our friend, and that is going to make our lives so much easier. On our numerator, I'm going to put parentheses here. You notice we're going to multiply 1 times 1, so that's going to give us our first term. And then we are going to multiply 1 times square root of 1 plus x. So this is going to be plus square root 1 plus x. And then negative, so minus square root of 1 plus x. And lastly, we are going to end up with a minus, and notice we have 1 plus x. We have 2 copies of that. In other words, they are squared. All right, the nice thing about that is once we get here, we notice a couple of things. First of all, our square roots in the middle are going to disappear, which makes our lives a lot easier. Second of all, the squared and our square root on the last bit also disappear, which makes life even better. And that's why we do this little trick here, this little tip, is because it allows us to get rid of all the square roots that we were dealing with, that were making life uncomfortable for us. Plus x, and that has a square root, 1 plus square root plus x. And so what we are left with in our numerator is this. Now notice when we distribute that negative sign throughout, we get a 1 minus 1. So our 1's are actually going to cancel, and we end up with the limit as x goes to 0 of negative x over x square root 1 plus x, 1 plus square root 1 plus x. Now we can cancel that x out on front, which is going to make our lives even better. limit as x goes to 0 of -1 over square root 1 plus x, 1 plus square root 1 plus x. All right, now we want to see what happens when we plug in 0 for x. We get a -1 on our numerator, and our denominator becomes 1 plus 0 square root times 1 plus square root of 1 plus 0. And when we simplify that, this is going to be 1 plus 1, which gives us 2. 2 times 1 gives us 2. So this gives us a -1/2. There we go. There's a beautiful answer. Thank you for listening.